Picture this. You're scrolling through LinkedIn at 11 p.m. on a Thursday night, and you see it again. Another post from someone celebrating their seven-figure net worth or talking about how they've crushed it financially. Their profile picture shows them at some nice restaurant, and you think, yeah, okay, good for them. But then something starts nagging at you. You look at your own situation. Maybe you've got a house that's worth something now, or you've been in real estate for a while, and you start wondering, if the market tanks, if housing prices actually drop like they did in 2008, how much of that net worth is actually real? I'm macro, and I spend an embarrassing amount of time thinking about money, mostly because I've noticed how confidently people talk about their wealth without actually being clear about where it comes from. I help people untangle the difference between what looks impressive on paper and what actually keeps the lights on. And honestly, that gap, it's way bigger than most people admit. Here's what I've realized after looking at countless net worth statements, real estate portfolios, and financial profiles. There's this weird illusion floating around in our culture where someone buys a house, the market goes up for 15 years, and suddenly they're convinced they're this shrewd investor, when really, they just benefited from being in the right place at the right time. Which, I mean, good for them, but it's not the same as having liquidity, having real assets, or having the kind of wealth that actually survives a financial downturn. So here's what we're exploring today. What percentage of people who call themselves millionaires would actually be completely broke if they had to liquidate everything that isn't their home? And more importantly, what does that tell us about where we should actually be building wealth? This isn't about making anyone feel bad. It's about seeing the financial world more clearly. Because when you understand the difference between paper wealth and real wealth, between being net worth rich and actually having breathing room in your bank account, that's when you start making better decisions. So let's dig into this. Let's start with some basic math that honestly should be more obvious than it is. The Federal Reserve actually tracks this stuff. And when researchers looked at the typical millionaire in America, they found something kind of shocking. Around 80% of millionaires have more than half their net worth tied up in real estate. Not stocks, not businesses, not cash. Real estate. Specifically, their primary home. Now, you know what's interesting? That number doesn't feel surprising when you say it out loud, but it is surprising when you think about what it means. It means that if you took 1,000 random millionaires, people who literally have a seven-figure net worth, and you asked them to become liquid, to convert everything to cash, about 800 of them would be in a very different financial position than they think they are. Let me give you a concrete example. Sarah is a woman I read about in a real estate case study. She's 58 years old. And on paper, she's a millionaire. Her house in suburban Denver is worth $1.2 million. She's lived there for 28 years. Somewhere along the way, she paid it off. So her net worth, about $1.2 million, minus maybe $50,000 in savings, minus a car. But here's the thing. She's still working part-time because she can't quite retire. Her income from her job is what covers her property taxes, her insurance, her medical bills. So is she wealthy? Technically, yes. Is she rich? Not really. Is she financially secure? Kind of, but it's fragile. Because that $1.2 million home is illiquid. If she sells it, she loses her primary residence. If she takes out a reverse mortgage, she's borrowing against her largest asset at rates that, honestly, are not great. She's house rich and cash poor, which is a phrase we use but don't actually take seriously enough. And when Sarah looks at her net worth statement, she sees that number, $1.2 million, and it makes her feel secure. But the security that number promises her isn't actually real. It's an illusion. She can't live off that net worth. She can't retire on it. That's the question nobody asks. And Sarah isn't an outlier. She's actually the norm. Most of the millionaires in America became millionaires not because they built businesses or accumulated stocks. They became millionaires because they bought a house in 1995 and the market went up. Good for them. But we've started treating that as a sign of financial brilliance, and that's misleading.
Here's where it gets really interesting, and where a lot of financial advice just completely misses the point. When someone tells you they're a millionaire, what you're actually hearing is, I'm worth $1 million on paper, according to how we measure net worth. But net worth is kind of a weird metric, right? It includes things like the equity in your home, but it doesn't tell you anything about your actual financial flexibility. Let's do some real math. Imagine two people, both exactly 50 years old. Both have a net worth of exactly $1 million. Person A has a house worth $800,000 with no mortgage and about $200,000 in liquid assets, savings, stocks, retirement accounts. Person B has a house worth $900,000 with no mortgage, $80,000 in liquid assets, and another $20,000 in a car. On paper, person B is wealthier, but person A can retire tomorrow if they wanted to. Person A has flexibility. Person A can handle an emergency. Person B? Person B is locked in. They've got a house that requires maintenance. They can't easily downsize. They're stuck. This is the thing nobody really talks about. The composition of your wealth is actually more important than the total. And when your wealth is mostly made up of an asset that you can't quickly sell, that you're living in, that's generating property taxes every single year, you're not actually in the position you think you are. When you own a home, you have what I call locked-in life costs: property taxes, insurance, maintenance. These aren't optional. It's not like owning a stock where you can just sell it if you need money. You own a house, you've got bills that don't go away. So if you retire at 60 with $1 million net worth, but $800,000 of that is a house with $15,000 a year in taxes and maintenance, you actually need investment income to cover that. You're not as free as you think. Let me take a step back here because I want to be fair. Real estate in America has been, historically, the single best wealth-building vehicle for regular people. If you bought almost any house in almost any decent neighborhood 20 or 30 years ago, you made money. A lot of money, actually. The median home price in 1995 was around $160,000. Today, it's over $400,000. That's a 150% increase in nominal terms. But here's what we need to separate: luck from skill, and passive wealth building from actual financial sophistication. Most people who got rich off real estate would not have gotten rich if they'd invested the same money in the stock market. Not because real estate is better, it's actually not, but because most people bought one house and lived in it. They didn't actively manage anything. They just bought a place, paid the mortgage, and benefited from one of the longest, strongest real estate booms in history. And now we're telling these folks that they're shrewd investors and they've built wealth. And I mean, they have, but they've also been incredibly lucky to live during a specific time period with a specific asset class that happened to go up for 4 decades. And here's the part that's worth thinking about. What happens next? Real estate goes down too. It cycles. What happens if you remove the real estate component? If we look at the actual liquid wealth that these millionaires have accumulated through their own effort, that number is often shockingly small. We're talking people in their 60s with homes paid off but less than $200,000 in retirement savings. That's not retirement. That's hope. So why does this matter beyond just the facts and figures? Because there's a psychological piece here that's quietly destroying people's financial decisions. If you believe you're a millionaire because of your house, you probably act like you're more financially secure than you actually are. You might not save aggressively. You might assume you can always access that home equity if you need it, which technically you can, but through a loan, which means you're going backward, which means you're paying interest. You might take more financial risk elsewhere because you think you have a safety net. You might tell yourself that you're set, that you don't need to keep building, and that's dangerous. There's also this comparison trap that happens. You look at your home value, you do the mental math, and suddenly you're in the category, the millionaire category, that makes you feel good. It's psychologically satisfying. But the moment something changes, a job loss, a health crisis, a market downturn, you realize that your security was always more fragile than you thought. I knew someone, a high school friend, who's a real estate agent, and she was telling me about these clients who'd lived in their house for 30 years. And the house was worth like $1.5 million, and they were treating it like they were bulletproof financially. And then the guy lost his job, And suddenly they're stressed about property taxes, about maintaining the property, about the fact that their net worth looks amazing, but their monthly cash flow is actually pretty tight. The psychological security of being a millionaire was real. The actual financial security, it was fragile. So who's actually wealthy? Who's actually secure? Let's be specific about it. Real millionaires, people who actually have flexibility, who actually have options, who actually have wealth that works for them, they have a different profile. They have diversified assets. Maybe a house, sure, but also liquid savings, maybe a business, maybe stock portfolios, maybe rental properties that generate cash flow. Their net worth is spread across multiple asset classes. And crucially, they don't have a single asset that accounts for 80% of their wealth. These folks also tend to have something called wealth consciousness, which sounds fancy, but really just means they think about money strategically. They understand the difference between net worth and cash flow. They know what their assets actually produce. They're not relying on hope or luck or a single bet. They're building systematically. And here's the thing that gets me. Some of the wealthiest people I've studied actually have lower net worths than the house-rich millionaires, but they sleep better at night. They have more flexibility. They can handle emergencies. They can take career risks. They can help their kids or their parents if needed, because their wealth is actually available. Think about an entrepreneur who sold a business for $2 million. That money is liquid. It's in a bank account or it's invested in stocks or bonds. If they need it, they can access it. If the market tanks, they might lose some of it, but they can still buy groceries. They can still make strategic decisions. Compare that to someone with a $2 million house and $50,000 in savings. Are they in similar positions? Not even close. One person has options. One person has a house. The real millionaires don't confuse their house with their net worth. They keep them separate. Their home is their home. It's something they live in. It hopefully appreciates, but it's not their financial plan. It's not their retirement strategy. I think it's really important to get specific here about what you should actually do with this information, because understanding a problem and acting on it are two very different things. First, let's be honest about your situation. If you own a home, you have a real asset. That's good. But don't let it be your entire financial story. Don't let your home equity be your retirement plan. Don't assume that you're wealthier than you actually are based on your house value. Second, start thinking about your actual liquid wealth. Ignore your house for a second. Take your house out of the equation. Now, how much do you actually have? How much can you access? That number should be growing aggressively, because that's your actual financial security. If you're making good money and that liquid wealth isn't growing, something's wrong with your spending or your strategy. If you're living in a place where housing is eating up more than 30% of your income, that's a problem, because it means you can't build the liquid wealth you actually need. And here's a small thing that matters. Start separating these concepts in your head. Stop saying, "I'm a millionaire," if what you mean is my house is worth $1 million. Say, "My house is worth $1 million." Own that accurately. Because the moment you start believing you're a millionaire based on home equity, you start making financial decisions based on a false premise. Okay, so we've established that a lot of people are wealthier on paper than they actually are in practice. But why should we care? Why does this matter beyond just personal finance optimization? Because this misunderstanding is actually affecting how we think about the economy, about inequality, about financial security as a whole. When surveys ask people about their net worth, they're including home equity. When reports come out saying the average American family has a net worth of $500,000, a huge chunk of that is homes. And we've started accepting this as normal wealth, as security. But if half of that wealth isn't actually accessible, if it's locked away in a primary residence, then the actual financial security picture is much grimmer than the numbers suggest. I'm not saying real estate is bad. I'm saying we need to be more honest about what it is. A housing choice that often happens to appreciate in value, not a foolproof wealth-building strategy. And when we confuse those two things, we make worse decisions. Here's what I wish more people understood. You can be happy with your home and be clear-eyed about its role in your financial life. These things aren't contradictory. I grew up in a culture that worshipped homeownership, that treated it as the ultimate financial goal. And look, there's nothing wrong with owning a home. I own a home. It's great. But I don't pretend it's my primary wealth-building engine. It's a place I live and it happens to appreciate, which is nice. But my actual financial security comes from my business, from my investments, from my savings rate, from the choices I make about where I spend money and where I invest it. What if more people thought that way? What if we separated the emotional, psychological, and practical benefits of homeownership from the financial narrative we've built around it? You'd have homeowners who are more comfortable with the idea of moving if the housing market goes down or if their local economy changes. You'd have people who are more focused on building liquid wealth. You'd have fewer financial surprises, because when you're clear about what you actually own and what you actually have, you can plan. You can make real choices instead of hoping that your house keeps going up in value. I want to end with something that I think is important, and it's this. Understanding this stuff shouldn't make you feel bad about your home or your choices. If you own a home, you've made a decision that worked out pretty well in this moment in history. That's good. That's something to be proud of. But I think what happens for a lot of us is we take that asset, we look at what it's worth, and we use that number to feel a certain way about ourselves. We feel secure. We feel wealthy. We feel like we've made it. And there's nothing wrong with feeling good about your financial situation. The problem is when that feeling isn't based in reality, because the moment something shifts, a job loss, a market downturn, a life change, you realize that the security you felt was partly an illusion. The wealth was more fragile than you thought, and then you're stressed and confused and wondering how you went from being a millionaire to being worried about your financial situation. But what if you looked at it differently? What if you acknowledge that your house is valuable and you're glad you have it, but you also got really serious about building actual, liquid, accessible wealth? What if you stopped using your home equity as the proof that you're financially secure and instead looked at your savings rate, your investments, your cash flow? That's where the real stability is. That's where the real security comes from. Not from appreciation that might go away, not from an asset you can't easily access, but from consistent, intentional choices about how you earn, spend, and invest your money. Here's what I'm asking you to do. Go look at your net worth statement if you have one. Really look at it. What percentage is real estate? What percentage is actually liquid? What would your life look like if housing prices dropped 30% tomorrow? Could you still pay your bills? Could you still hit your financial goals? If the answer is, I don't know, or probably not, then you've got work to do. And that work isn't complicated. It's just about redirecting some of your attention and your resources toward building the kind of wealth that actually keeps you secure. Your home is part of your financial life. It's an important part, but it shouldn't be the only part. And once you really understand that, once you separate the emotional comfort of thinking you're a millionaire from the actual discipline of building real wealth, everything else gets easier. So start there. Start by being honest with yourself about what you actually have. Write down your numbers, see where you really stand, and then start building from that honest place.